and culture on Japanology Plus on NHK World Japan.
Watch NHK World Japan now over the air and on Comcast and Verizon.
Programs on MPT are made possible by our members and the following.
Freedom Car, celebrating 30 years of serving the community's passenger transportation needs. Safety protocols strictly followed. Now offering auto detailing services. Learn more at freedomcar.net.
Are you a Maryland renter at risk of being evicted due to COVID-19 related issues? Help is on the way with Maryland's Emergency Rental Assistance Program. You may be eligible for assistance in helping to pay current or past due rent and avoid the threat of eviction because of wage loss or illness due to the pandemic. To learn more, visit rentrelief.maryland.gov or call 877-546-5595.
State Circle is made by MPT to serve all of our diverse communities and is made possible by the generous support of our members. Thank you.
Connecting Marylanders to their government. This is State Circle.
Welcome to State Circle. Coming up on our program tonight, the crazy cicadas. Are they wearing out their welcome in your neighborhood? And is the pandemic recession ending? We will talk to two leading economists. First tonight, the governor's controversial plan to expand the D.C. Beltway using toll lanes. This week, the Transportation Authority gave initial approval for a private partnership to expand the Capitol Beltway from the American Legion Bridge up Interstate 270 past Rockville. An earlier version, including most of the Beltway through Montgomery and Prince George's counties, was scaled back. New lanes would be added with variable tolls, but free to high occupancy vehicles. Joining us now to discuss the plan are Edgar Gonzalez, Executive Director of the Suburban Maryland Transportation Alliance, and Ben Ross, Chair of the Maryland Transit Opportunities Commission. Gentlemen, thanks to both of you for joining us. Let me start with the big question. Is this project needed? And I'll begin with Mr. Gonzalez.
Absolutely, this project is needed. Every day, all our commuters that use the I-270 and I-495 crossing the American Legion Bridge experiences intolerable levels of congestion. In addition to the current congestion, the TPB, the planning board at COG, is projecting an increase of 1.2 million people in the region by 2045, 913,000 jobs. The American Legion Bridge is expected to have traffic increases of 34,000 vehicles per day. If we have congestion now, the congestion in the future will be much worse. Instead of 6 to 7 hours of congestion, we'll have 12, 14, 16 hours of congestion.
Let me ask Mr. Ross, how do you see it?
This project will make the traffic worse, not better. Right now, there are giant traffic jams going north on 270 where the lanes merge. Instead of having 6 lanes merging into 2, you're going to have 7 lanes merging into 2. The other big traffic jam in Maryland is where 270 and the Beltway merge at Wisconsin Avenue. You're going to add 3 new lanes of traffic feeding into that. So what's going to happen? The CEO who lives in Potomac can pay the $20 toll and drive to Tyson's. But if he tries to drive into Maryland, he's going to hit terrible traffic. So this project, what this project will do is send our jobs out of Maryland and into Virginia.
So if there's a problem that needs a solution, is this the right solution or do you have a better idea?
Yeah, the better idea is to expand transit. The first priority for the 270 corridor is to put a third track on the MARC train line so that trains would run all day, both ways, from DC through Silver Spring and Rockville, Gaithersburg, to Frederick and Brunswick, and we hope in the future to Hagerstown.
Do we know where this traffic is going? I think about the Legion Bridge in particular, which I've been stuck on plenty of times. I've driven as far as Point of Rocks to get around that backup. My sense is you have a lot of people from maybe the Loudoun, Dulles area coming all the way in, going over that bridge, and then going back out 270.
Okay. So let me clarify a couple of things. Let's make sure that we're talking real numbers. MARC carries 7,000 people a day before the pandemic. 7,000. The American Legion Bridge today carries 235,000 vehicles. Look at the comparison, 7,000 versus 235,000. If you add a third line, supposedly you can do it and you can convince CSX that you can intrude into their right of way, that you can solve all of those problems. Let's say that you double the ridership, you triple the ridership, you quintuple the ridership, you would have not more than 35,000 riders, assuming that you can do that, which will never happen. But if you do that, what are we going to do crossing the American Legion Bridge, where MARC doesn't do anything for the main problem that is being addressed by the project? Nothing at all.
Is there a transit option? Ben, let me ask before you respond, is there a transit option that would run over the bridge or an expanded bridge?
You could build rail over the bridge too. It's been looked at in Montgomery County and by the state DOT since the 1990s. But this project has this clause that was hidden for 14 years in Virginia's contract with Transurban, the toll company, that would prevent any rail from being built over that bridge for the next 65 years. It's an outrage against the public to have secret clauses in contracts that would prevent not just next year, but 65 years it would block transit over that bridge.
Well, the contract point brings me to the public-private partnership, which I don't really understand. I'm not sure many people do. A private company is going to do the whole thing. Does this mean that company basically owns the Beltway?
In practice, yes.
No.
Not legally, but in practice, they have non-compete clauses. We don't even know what they say. Here is the contract between Virginia and Transurban for their side of the bridge. Look at this. I don't know what it says. Mr. Gonzalez, I don't think knows what it says.
I know the relevant clauses of the agreement, and it's in Virginia. We're talking about a Maryland project. This non-compete clause, there are no non-compete clauses in the Maryland contract, absolutely none. So nothing precludes Maryland for building anything.
But on the PPP,
well, how are you going to build a bridge without Virginia if the bridge goes to Virginia? The governor says that this is a partnership between the two states. This is his Facebook page when he announced it.
Absolutely. The project can be built. It touches on both states. It helps both states for our growth. But and so the so-called non-compete clause that you're talking about doesn't specifically talk about rail. It does not. Okay, so it's not accurate to say that it talks about rail. It talks about all modes, not only rail. Okay, so doesn't mention rail at all if you look at it closely, which I have. Number one. Number two, you stated clearly that the possibility of transit on the American Legion Bridge and across the Beltway has been studied since 1990. Well, that's somewhat accurate, but there are more recent studies. Metro, for example, in 2016, did an analysis of a metro rail system in the Beltway. What they found is that the most heavily used segment would not reach 1,700 people per mile in ridership per day, 1,700. That is the most on any of the heaviest links. So what does that mean? Well, the average today, or not today, but prior to the pandemic, the average ridership per mile in the metro system is 5,300 people per mile.
Well, if that's the case, why won't Transurban drop that clause? Why aren't you asking Transurban to drop that clause?
Gentlemen, I don't want to get too far into Virginia's business on this, but I do want to ask both of you to comment on the idea of the toll lanes themselves. They're nicknamed Lexus lanes by some. The idea that people who could pay what you speculated might be a $20 toll can go speeding by while other people sit in traffic doesn't sit well with everybody. How do you see that?
You know, that's not speculation, the $20 toll. That's the average toll from GW Parkway to I-370 in the evening rush hour will be $20 when the thing opens in 2026. The maximum toll will be $50. And then that goes up 2% plus inflation every year after that until 2070 something.
The toll rates have not been totally established yet. There are public hearings going on or that are open to the public, number one. Number two, the minimum rate is 20 cents per mile. On a segment that is not more than 12 miles, that's $2.40, not $20, okay?
Yeah, it'll be cheap at 4 in the morning.
Let's continue talking about this need for rail on the American Legion Bridge. That's just another example of being obstructionist, of presenting ideas that are unreasonable so that the project is delayed, so that the cost increases, and so that we have different government players working on the project.
Gentlemen, before we run out of time, let me ask both of you one last question. The Biden administration wants to do a big infrastructure bill, $1 trillion or something like that. Is it possible the money is in there to expand these roadways without tolls?
Absolutely, and that gives us a level playing field where we can do a study and really figure out what are our transportation needs and what do we build for the people as a whole, instead of spending money to give a first-class ride only to those that can afford to pay high tolls.
Edgar, last word on this.
That is incorrect. The main proponent at the federal level for killing this project is Anthony Brown, Representative Brown. He just presented a set of projects that he would like to be funded under the Biden program. And it's a total of $150 million that he's asking for. $0 get dedicated to the Beltway, the American Legion Bridge, any rail, anywhere. There are no plans for rail anywhere in the region. Is just an oxymoron. It's something that's
not true.
Gentlemen, I'm afraid we have to leave it there. Mr. Ross, Mr. Gonzalez, thank you both. Maryland is among 24 Republican-led states that are ending enhanced unemployment benefits. Starting July 3rd, Maryland will join the states ending provisions, including $300 supplemental weekly payments. Republicans say generous subsidies for the jobless are making it hard for employers to fill jobs now that the country is reopening. Democratic leaders of the Maryland legislature called Governor Hogan's decision short-sighted and hurtful to many. For a reading on the job market and the economy, we're joined by Peter Marisi, economics professor emeritus at the University of Maryland, and David Cooper of the Economic Policy Institute. Thanks to both of you for being with us. First question is the emergency over at this point, and should these benefits be withdrawn? We'll start with Professor Marisi.
Well, I think the economy is recovering very, very nicely. In terms of GDP, we're going to be beyond where we were when the crisis began, certainly by July 1. In terms of employment, not. We lost 22 million jobs, and if you consider where we would have been on trend, we're still short 10 million. Now, the question is, will any more stimulus help that? Probably not. We have a lot of stimulus in the system. Whatever spending we should do should be on the basis of, well, this would be a good thing to do even if the COVID had never happened. But a lot of that has to do with the fact that the economy's changed so much. We've learned how to use technology better. People aren't going to be shopping in malls or in stores as much as they used to, and so forth. So some of these jobs aren't coming back, and they're in different locations. So one of the things we really do need to be looking at very seriously is relocation assistance, jobs training in an accelerated fashion in a way that we don't customarily do in this country, and so forth. So, in one sense, the emergency is over, but there is lingering scars, if you will. There's good things that happened and bad.
Professor, does that mean that the supplemental unemployment should be allowed to end, or should it continue?
Well, I think it is a regional thing, and I think that in many places, like in Maryland, it's probably just not necessary anymore because there are plenty of jobs around. You were in Ocean City when we spoke about this interview with lots of help wanted signs. However, I do think, and this is not really available, it is possible to retrain people in a couple of months. Levi Strauss is doing it with retail employees, but we don't have that really a good impetus for that in the public sector. That's the kind of thing that we need from the public sector, is to partner and to provide the means for people to get where jobs are and to get the training that they need to do them. But just generalized assistance, I think some of the complaints of small businesses are valid. It's hard to sort with all the other things that are going on, the schools not being fully open, daycare being a problem. I don't buy the thing about, well, I might catch COVID, because the vaccine is really readily available. I had somebody where I frequently eat said he hadn't been vaccinated yet. And I said, goodness, why? It's really quite available, and you should just go do it.
Mr. Cooper, you wrote a column on this advocating for continuing the full supplemental unemployment benefits. Why is that still necessary in your view?
Well, I think that we just haven't fully recovered yet. And I agree with Peter that the economy is on the right track and that some jobs are available. There is evidence in particular sectors of employers maybe having a hard time finding the workers that they need. But that's what happens when you have an economy that essentially goes from 0 to 100 overnight. Employers it's going to take time for those employers to staff up to meet that pent up demand. But that doesn't mean that we should be cutting off benefits to all of the workers in other industries that may not be well suited for those jobs, that may have skills that are better suited for other positions. We shouldn't be taking away aid to those folks. I mean, what Maryland is doing is choosing to pull out of programs that are going to cut benefits for an estimated 310,000 people. And of those, about 85%, so that's about 250,000 people, are going to lose access to any benefits whatsoever. The state is down about 30,000 jobs in education and health, 17,000 jobs in state and local public sector, 7,000 jobs in construction. I just don't think it's helpful to the long-term health of the economy to be denying aid to workers from those industries simply because some businesses in Ocean City might be struggling to find staff.
The argument we've heard is that the current benefits are too generous, that somebody can be getting the normal unemployment, which is maybe $400 a week maximum, plus the supplemental $300, and they're incentivized to not work. Does that make sense?
I don't think it does. I don't think there's strong evidence that the benefits are holding back people from taking jobs that are suitable for them. There may be some instances where workers are taking a pass on jobs that either pay less than the jobs that they held previously, or that aren't suitable for their skills or their circumstances. But I think that's okay. We want workers to be able to have the ability to turn down a job, to keep looking for work until they find something that's suitable for them. To simply pull the rug out from under them to try and force them to take jobs that may not be appropriate for them is just not smart government policy.
Peter?
Well, I think that part of the problem here is that some of the customary requirements that have been associated with unemployment benefits, haven't been in play, that you be actively looking for employment and so forth. It's very difficult to do in a crisis like this because one of the sad things about government in this century is that while we may spend too much money, from my point of view as a conservative in some places, some aspects of government are woefully underfunded and kind of really in the mid-20th century. And one of them are our unemployment insurance offices and programs around the country. I've written that the whole thing needs to be modernized and standardized, but I wouldn't give people more money than they get on unemployment than they would get when they were working. When benefits should end is one issue we can debate, where they should end, whether we can structure it by industry and by county and so forth. But paying people more not to work than when they were working is hard to justify on the basis of need, especially now when it's quite apparent the economy has just about all the stimulus it needs. Going forward, I think we need to be talking about some of these industrial policies that the president wants to implement. I've long favored them, even though I'm a conservative, for a variety of reasons that really we don't have time to get into here. But I think that we need to be looking at things like infrastructure and industrial policy and assistance to R&D, either in terms of the growth they will create and therefore the dynamic benefits and revenue they will create, or by funding them. I don't think that and the same thing goes for jobs training. I don't think we should be borrowing any more than we are already borrowing, because we're going to have a deficit of, at least by the president's admission, of 1.3 trillion. And honestly, if he does nothing, if nothing happened, I think it would be even more than that.
So that's with a national view of the issue. From a Maryland-centric Annapolis view of it, the feds are basically offering to spend another $1 billion over the summer before this plan would sunset anyway. The extra $300 a week multiplied by all those people, by all those weeks, is at least $1 billion. It's the famous Ben Bernanke helicopter money. For the question of Maryland turning that down, is there a multiplier effect that we're walking away from?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, there's a multiplier effect, whether you're talking locally or nationally. The question is, do we need any more multiplier effect when we have the kind of inflation brewing that we have? I don't know that demand is any longer a problem. The multiplier is about demand. Probably David has a different point of view.
Yeah, I mean, unemployment insurance is one of the strongest stimulus measures we have. These are dollars that would be spent at Maryland businesses that would stimulate more demand, accelerate job growth in the industries where there may currently not be jobs available for workers that lost their jobs previously. I do think that the primary problem that we have right now is a demand problem. It's not a shortage of available labor, it's a shortage of available jobs.
We do see businesses offering sign-on bonuses to find employees these days. Theoretically, the other issue that you brought up, retraining, is something where businesses will also take the initiative and spend the money, and that creates perhaps the impact that the Fed is looking for: higher wages, more spending, more inflation.
Well, I think one way or another, people are going to be paid more coming out of this mess. Simply because they have relocated where they live. And as a consequence, a lot of jobs really don't make sense if you don't live really close to them because they don't pay enough.
Our thanks to Peter Marisi and David Cooper. Now, have your summer visitors overstayed their welcome? We're talking about the cicada invasion. Nancy Amata tells us how much longer they'll be sticking around.
How would you describe how they look?
Alien-like, I guess. They have those big red eyes.
Sometimes they grow. It's just the noise they make. They're scary.
But to entomologist Samuel Ramsey, also known as Dr. Sammy,
the sound that they're creating is truly a love song. It's beautiful. It's their way of serenading the opposite sex in an attempt to attract individuals that they can mate with.
He says we're privileged to hear and witness these magical creatures that do no harm and only come out every 17 years.
We should feel very fortunate. This biological phenomenon that we're experiencing right now, the fact that it coincides with our own emergence from isolation is quite remarkable.
Dr. Sammy says their sense of timing and ability to coordinate is nothing short of a miracle.
They worked so hard. I mean, think about it. They have gone through this incredible process where they've been underground all this time, they've been feeding, and then they're able to then coordinate with all the other cicadas in the area to emerge at the same time. Think about what these creatures can teach us about nonverbal communication.
Numbering in the trillions, the cicadas have been picked up on radar by the National Weather Service. Dr. Sammy says there's a good explanation why some areas are inundated with the big bugs, while others, like this neighborhood in Frederick County, hardly have any to speak of.
You'll notice patterns. You'll notice that there is more paving in those areas, or that there are fewer trees in those areas, or that the trees are very young in those regions.
And while they're here, they're not just creating a lot of noise.
These insects that are landing on the trees right now, they're laying eggs in branches that are about the width of a pencil. These eggs are really small, and as they hatch, a cicada about the size of an ant is going to fall out of those trees 10 weeks after those eggs are laid. They're going to burrow under the ground.
So how long will we be serenaded by these cicadas? Dr. Sammy predicts they'll be sticking around until early to mid-July, and then we'll have to wait until 2038 to hear them again.
I think they're awesome. Every 17 years. So, you sort of think about that in life cycle terms. When you think about where you were 17 years ago, and then you think where you're going to be 17 years from now, and some of us are like, oh my God, that's like we're going to be old.
For those who want to celebrate these remarkable creatures, ice cream stores are getting creative. And who knew? Demand is high for chocolate-covered cicadas with cinnamon and Old Bay. After all,
they are very low in fat, very high in protein, a really good source of nutrition.
And for now, there's an endless supply. I'm Nancy Yamada for State Circle.
Nancy, thank you. That is State Circle for this week. Monday on Direct Connection, answers to your questions about the new Alzheimer's drug. You can email questions in advance to livequestions@mpt.org. Remember to follow us on Twitter and Facebook @MPT News. And now for all of us at MPT, thanks for watching and have a good night.
This program was made by MPT to serve all of our diverse communities. University of Maryland Center for Environmental Science, leading the way on Chesapeake Bay restoration, while guiding our state, nation, and world toward a more sustainable future.
MCA Maryland has been on the job since 1927.